I talked to Robert a few weeks ago, and I think a lot of the Peel sessions this next year are coming out. He's redoing them at the moment. We have a friend, Frankie Bell, who was a sort of semi-famous wrestler called the Black Hat, and he'd always had a hankering to be a singer. And so one night we decided, well, let's call Frank up and we'll write a song for him.
Carnage Visors.
When I moved here from England in about 1994, I possessed a copy at my father's house. My father died, and the copy is not transferred all the way over here to California, so I'm not sure, but maybe I could dig one up somewhere.
In orange?
It's not out yet on DVD.
That's right, it's not on DVD.
Although Robert's promising me it's out this year.
Oh,
well, 2011. We're never really gothic like that. I mean, you have to go on the goth cruise to find out the real gothic bands. We were a little bit more on the absurd style, I think, than gothic,
Any possibility of you playing with the Cure again?
I'm open to the possibility. In fact, I wrote to Robert last week or so and said, hey, Faith's anniversary is coming up, 30 years of Faith. Why don't we go out and play that and play it as a whole album and do it again as the original band?
That all proved to be a perfectly timely introduction for my guest who has just arrived. His name is Lol Tolhurst. And
hi.
Greetings. Thank you for coming in. Lol was founding member of The Cure, starting in,
Oh, gosh. 76, probably, when we first started up. Maybe.
76?
Yeah.
Will you pull, I think, that microphone closer?
This one, is that better?
Try it again.
Better.
Try it now.
Okay. Not picking me up.
There it is.
Okay.
Low.
Good.
There we go. Low voice. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. I'm sorry. So what year was it around?
I suppose 76, really. We first played at our school in December 76. And that was really the start of a proper band, Yeah.
Very cool. And I've read... actually, you can pop those headphones on and make sure you're coming in okay. So I haven't had a guest in, so... Pardon me as I'm making it all happen. My last guest was actually Boyd Rice.
Oh, okay.
And that was a pretty crazy, wild, industrial-esque show.
I bet.
So I've read that you knew Robert Smith at least since you were, 5 or 6?
Yeah, I mean, the first day, my first memory of my first day at school was Robert's mother coming up to me and giving me his hand and saying, look after Robert. And we both got on the bus together to go to school. So, that was, I guess, like 1964. So, it's pretty early on. But when you're that young, you don't really know anybody particularly. You just sort of hang out and you go to school and we both do the same things. And when we were about 11 or 12, we discovered that we both liked Jimi Hendrix, so... That was like the starting point for the musical stuff, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, there's the cover of Foxy Lady on the first,
yes,
on the first Cure record. So, and it's funny because the debut record comes out amidst the sea of punk releases, or just after it. But it sounds more like Hendrix or the Seeds or something. It definitely has 60s influences more.
Right. Well, most of that was due to the fact that when we started, we were like 16 or whatever when we first sort of started properly, and for 3 years we were just really at Robert's house practicing and rehearsing. But in between, making music, we would sneak into his brother's room. He had an older brother, and he had all these groovy records, and that was all the kind of stuff that we listened to. So it had a great influence on us. And where we lived, we were 25 miles from the centre of London. So although we were really, really aware of punk and what's going on at the time, we didn't feel like the urgency to conform to whatever was this week's particular punk fashion or whatever.
And what's the town? What's it called again?
Well, we I actually came from a town called Hawley, which is the other side of Gatwick Airport. Most people who've ever been to London on a plane have been at some point through Gatwick Airport. So it's just there. It's like, it's the suburbs, you know. It's where everybody lives to catch the train in the morning and go to work in London. So Crawley, Hawley, they're both two towns on either side of the airport. So that's where we grew up.
I see. And did any punk bands come through and actually play that far out, or were you just expected to?
No, we saw a lot of people. We saw the Stranglers, the Jam, the Clash played, which it was a big enough sort of area for people to want to bother to come and play. So I think we had the opportunity to see most of our contemporaries, if you like, but not be sort of involved in the intensity of it. Or we were sort of percolating quietly out in the suburbs, you know.
Right. Did the Pistols come through there?
No, I don't think so. So.
Wonder if maybe they played an undercover gig.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have probably heard about it because we were really sort of the only, probably. I always tell people we were the first punks, but I think we were probably the only punks in our town, you know. So we kind of we would have heard about all of that if it had happened, you know.
Right. I mean, I've talked on the show before. I mean, because this show, I mean, I play Velvet Underground records, but mostly it starts with punk and then moves, through post-punk into contemporary. But I've often espoused, a great thank you to the fascists who were running England at the time, who banned punk from being played in London because that forced the bands to come to your areas and to go as far north as Manchester and Liverpool.
Right, well, and also I think it was the first time, at least in our lifetime, where people had bothered to kind of do things for themselves a bit, and so they would put on gigs in like small village halls or something like that. They would bother to come and play to people, whereas before then we really didn't see bands unless they were playing up in London at Wembley Arena or something like that. It was, or Hammersmith Odeon. It was far too distant for us, really, and especially when you're 15 or 16, that's still quite a big leap to make, to travel that far to go and see bands. So the whole punk thing kind of brought it more into our doorstep,
Sure. Were there any other bands in Crawley or Horley? Like, what would your contemporaries have been, and did they release any records?
Well, I mean, the Damned actually lived quite close to us, yes. And Rat, there's a funny story. Rat Scabies' mother was I don't know if she still is, a teacher, and she taught at the same school as Michael Dempsey, our bass player. She taught at his mother's school, so they were both friends, and I wondered if her real last name was Mrs. Scabies, whether I should address her as Mrs. Scabies or not, but no, that wasn't her real name. But there was lots. It's funny, I discuss this with people a lot. There's this little area of about 25 miles by 25 miles south of London by 25 miles and down to Brighton on the coast, and there's an awful lot of bands come from that area, from all over, all genres. I mean, I was looking at something the other day. Genesis were all started up about 10 miles from where we grew up, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that for the same reason that we did, there's a lot of access to music, if you like, but it's not necessarily the pressure to start up something very big straight away, and you can kind of continue on a very low level for a long time and kind of hone your craft, and the other truth is it's kind of boring there, being the suburb, but so commuter belt, so you kind of got to make your own entertainment, and that's what we did.
Right. I was talking with my girlfriend the other day, and she was sort of marveling over some weird bunch of records that I'd owned since I was a teenager. And I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, population of 220 people, but it was a half hour from Lincoln, a college town. Right. But thinking about before the internet, how import records and the knowledge of them would be passed along is this kind of amazing thing, and so I wondered, as with you growing up outside of London, did it fall to the music weeklies, or how did word of mouth?
And I mean, I hate to sound, I don't want to sound kids today don't know they've got it so good because of the internet, but it's true. We had to rely on the melody maker each week and the NME to tell us what was going on. And also, we were lucky because we had one little radio, sort of like kind of like Radio Shack in the town, but it also had a little record store at the back, probably about as big as the studio. And Simon, who's still the Cure's bass player, his brother ran this record store, and so Rick is his name. So every week we would go in and see Rick, and Rick would have the latest singles from like Rough Trade or whatever. He would bring them in, and we'd sit there and listen to them. He'd put them on, and we'd sit and go, oh, I like that one. Yeah, no, not keen on that. I like that one. So, you know, we would, it was kind of like, what do they call it? Bush telegraph, really. I mean, you know, we'd gradually find out little by little, you know, because there wasn't anything on the television, you know, and John Peel was the only thing on the radio, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, it was harder, but it made it a little bit more precious in a way. I don't know, you know.
Sure. Well, I mean, so it's the analogy to cable, you know, how many thousands of channels and nothing on. So, which is the challenge of the internet and music, you know, is finding what the minimal number of bands that are amazing among the sea of mediocrity.
Absolutely. You know, my son is 18 and he's a musician. He actually just started his first Californian tour this week. He's up in Santa Cruz tonight. But
wow, what's his band called?
His band's called Little Smoke.
Smoke.
Yeah, you might see. I mean, he's playing weird places. He's playing like he played this place in San Francisco last night called the Brainwash, and it's like it's a coffee shop with a laundrette. Yes, he said, you know, some people came, so that was good, you know, and he's like, it's his first tour, so he's kind of getting down to it. But no, I mean, he tells me about new bands and introduces me to new stuff, and people my age, you know, and I mean, you can work out how old I am if I tell you I was born in 59. People my age will often say to me, oh, there's been no good music since the 80s. And I say, no, it's not true. You've just got to find it, you know. And it's really, in some ways, it's easier because, yes, you just turn on your computer and you can find most things. But in other ways, there's too much. There's so much information coming in at you. You've got to have some kind of filter for it, you know.
Right. And an attention span.
Well, yes, I know. We all have very short attention spans nowadays just because we all have, you know, phones that tell us everything and, you know, the computer that tells us everything. And, yeah, it's funny. I do a little experiment now and again. I walk around in town and I watch how many people are actually paying attention to where they are, you know, and it's frightening.
Right. I have a whole list of questions, and of course, eventually, I do want to talk about the music you've been making with your current band, Levvenhurst. Right. I know that you've brought in some CDs. I want to play some new tracks, and we've got CDs and some shirts, too, to give out. Is that true?
Yeah, we got shirts to give out. You know, I mean, I guess we can make a little competition or the first person to call. And
okay, yeah, we can totally
whatever
do that.
You'd like to think. And
Let me see. Let me ask a little more. I guess we don't have to do this chronologically, but my questions are roughly chronologically.
That's fine. That'll make sense to me.
I'm sure at some point in my brain will start pinging off of, you know, I don't know what I'll start doing. But I did want to ask, you know, because as I was doing my research, that there are two bands that were cited as precursors to Easy Cure.
Right.
What Obelisk
and Malice. Yeah.
Malice. And what were those? Were they real bands? Meaning, did you play any gigs?
I think they were kind of a bit of a figment of our imagination, really. I mean, they were real bands to us, you know. But I can't actually remember that. Well, yeah, we did one gig as Malice, yeah.
And that was you and Robert.
That was me and Robert and a guy called Martin Creasy. I think Paul Thompson. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Michael Dempsey was there too. Yeah. So it's pretty much the original first band, but Robert wasn't singing. We had a different singer, but he was only for one show, and then he sort of quit, you know, and that was the end of that. And then we decided, well, if he quit, we better change the name, you know, so that nobody sort of connects us with that, and we changed the name pretty much at that point, I think, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I mean, some Cure fans who are listening in probably know the answers to all these questions, but I kind of want to, you know, I don't know who's listening, so I definitely want to. This is a good opportunity to just discuss the whole span of the band, and so pardon repetition, you sticklers out there. How do you explain the shift? Because I don't know the answer to this from Easy Cure to The Cure. I've never know the answer to that.
You know, the name Easy Cure came from a song that I had written for the band, and we decided, well, that kind of, you know, we weren't completely convinced. We thought, well, that sounds better than Malice. Malice sounds a little too far to the sort of the punk stuff, and we're not really completely like that. So we call ourselves Easy Cure, and we mulled that over for a little while, and we thought, well, no, we are a little more sort of leaning towards that kind of style, so let's just shorten it and call it The Cure, you know, because every band was The Jam, The Stranglers, you know,
right.
The Clash. It was always like that, so we decided, well, okay, we'll see how that works, and it kind of stuck, you know. So that was all right. Yeah.
And when you went in, I got this crazy bootleg in New York a decade ago or something, and played the Easy Cure session off of it.
Right.
What can you give me the background of you guys? Where did you go in to record this? And,
I think
were you
we
still
did it,
Easy Cure at that?
We did it in some little studio in North London, SAV, I think, or something it was called. Yeah. So basically, we were in and out in an afternoon, and we just bashed down the songs we knew and overdubs. I don't think we even really thought about doing anything. You know, we just sort of went in and played our songs and said, "Is that it?" And okay, and then we went home with our tapes. You know.
Uh-huh.
So.
And what did you do with the tapes from there? Because it's, I mean, I've seen a few of these tracks kind of come out. I think two of them were on the Three Imaginary Boys Rhino reissue, but most of them still haven't seen the light of day officially.
I think most Cure fans will have pretty much got everything we ever had, ever put out, because apart from me singing a version of "Oh Carol" or something like that, I don't think there's many, and that's not going to get played anytime soon, trust me. So apart from a few oddities like that, you know, I think pretty much everything's been put out there. But I don't know. They're a band. They show a band in its formation, really. You know, because we would rehearse 3 times a week, and we would try to write at least 3 songs every week if we could.
Wow. You
know, and so some were good, some were great, and some were absolutely awful. You know, and so. After a period of 3 years, we had, I don't know, to make Three Imaginary Boys, we probably had about 17 or 18 songs, and we went in and tried to record them all, and I think we came out, did about 14 maybe, and then, you know, out of that we culled the album. But it was a very quick process for us, that whole thing, because we'd actually been playing most of those songs for 3 years. So,
Wow. And I know that Chris Perry, right, who was the head of Fiction.
He when we met him, here's how we met him. We sent him a tape of our demo that we'd made, and in actual fact, we had been signed to another label beforehand for about 6 months, Areola Hansa, and they didn't like any of our songs. They wanted to make us into a boy band, you know, and so they would send us songs like I Fought the Law, and you know, let's do a version of that and see how it goes, you know, and it wasn't great. So after 6 months, we asked them, well, can we be released from our contract because we don't think we're getting very far, and they went, yes, okay, because they just didn't like us much at all, and we were kind of depressed after that. And then Rick, Simon's brother, who I'd mentioned to you about them, he said, I'm sick of you guys sitting around here, you know, moping, so here's some money. I forget how much it was, about $100, and go and make a demo and do something. And we did, and that's what got us the first meeting with Chris Perry. Now, we didn't know anything about his his new record label that he was starting. All we knew about was Polydor, who he'd worked for, because he was head of A&R. We knew that he'd signed Susie and the Banshees and the Jam, and we thought, well, he'd probably be sympathetic to us then. And we sent him a tape, and we met him there one afternoon, and he said, well, you know, I've got this great idea, and I think your songs are good, and I want to sign you. And we were thinking, oh, great, we were on Polydor. And he said, to my new label that I'm starting. And we thought, oh, it's a tiny little label with nobody on. And we were kind of disappointed, you know, the first time. But then, you know, over the next, I don't know, 6 months or so, we realised it was probably better to have somebody like him with us, because, you know, despite what happened in the end, I have to say that without Chris Perry, the Cure would never have been a success. that much I think is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
We needed somebody to be the interface between us and the big bad world, and that's what Chris Parry was. He dealt with Polydor to put the records out through them. He dealt with, the other labels when we came to America and stuff, and it's stuff that we could do ourselves, but I don't think we were really that capable of it. So it was a very fortunate meeting. So I always say to people, it's a combination of everything. A combination of the right place and the right time, some luck, to meet the right people, and hopefully somewhere a little talent. But it's like, you can have all the talent and get nowhere, and you can have all the luck and no talent and you'll get nowhere. So it has to be, the right combination. And I don't really think that we were particularly aware that was the right combination at the time, but it turned out so.
Right. I know that at some point, I guess it was after the recording, then Chris Parry sort of stepped in and produced the record and gave it its sort of colder, defining sound. Many people say. Were you aware at the time that oh my God, he's messing with the record, or was it sort of after the fact? Here's what I did with the record.
We were totally naive in that respect. We were 17, 18 years old, I guess, and to us, we turned up at the studio. Chris and Mike Hedges, who was the engineer, was at the mixing desk, and they said, "Go and play your songs," and we went and played our songs. And then afterwards, we sort of sat at the back and drank some beer. And so to us, that first recording session, we didn't really. I mean, we'd done some of our own stuff, but we figured, well, it's their big studio. It's because it was a very good studio, even though we weren't in there for very long, maybe a matter of days. We thought, well, they know what they're doing, so we'll leave them to it, And then when we first heard the record, we thought, well, it sounds a little sparse, but we weren't really that concerned. I mean, I wasn't that concerned. I thought it sounded different, which is kind of what you want to be when you're a musician. You want to be unique. You don't want to sound like everybody else, and it definitely didn't sound like anybody else. So we thought, okay, we'll go with it. I mean, over the years, there's been some sort of rewriting of history. Robert's decided he doesn't like it much as an album, and stuff. And I think that has more to do with the fact that he wasn't able to mix it himself or anything, So he's kind of revising the way he felt about it. But I remember at the time we felt pretty, happy about it. We thought, well, it's our first record. I mean, we didn't design the cover. We didn't have anything to do with that much. We were told, oh, here's your guy who's going to do your cover. Oh, okay. And he had this idea about the fridge and
no song titles.
No song titles. Which we kind of thought, well, that's cool. That's an interesting idea. And so we went along with it. But to be honest, we were fairly naive that first album. So it's not totally representative, but it's like it still has some parts of it that were definitely us.
And is it true that you guys were snuck into the studio at night while the studio was rented out for the jam? Like that's what I think I read somewhere.
That's another.
It's a good story.
It's a good story, and it's not true. I mean, the truth is, I used Rick Butler, the Jam's drummer. I used his drum kit to record on. He lent me his kit to record on because my kit was not that great, and he had some big deal with Yamaha, so he had this huge, lovely, beautiful new kit, and so that's what I used. I think it had more to do with the fact that Chris had produced the Jam before. He'd done their first album, I think.
Okay, yeah,
and, yeah. So he was friends with them, and that it seemed he could pull a few strings, so he said, well, if your kit's still in there, why don't we use it? And yeah, we were in there later on in the day, but I don't think they were actually recording there at all. I think we just borrowed the kit.
What actually, this was one of my questions. I was wondering what other bands Chris Parry produced, and if if the label, because he was a head honcho at the label, they allowed him to produce, or if he started as a producer. I was wondering what you knew about.
I think more than anything, one of his saving graces was he was in the right place at the right time, and he understood what was going on. whereas a lot of other people in the music business, I always remember Chris telling me a story where he took somebody out of Polydor. I can't swear to the name, but I think it was Jim Cook, and he took him down to see the Clash play somewhere and said, Jim, we've got to sign this band, they're going to be huge, and Jim sat petrified at the back of the place they were playing, and suddenly a bottle whizzed past his head and smashed on the wall behind him, and he just grabbed Chris and said, we're leaving, we're never signing this band, and ran out the door, and so, but Chris had a little bit more foresight, and he saw what was happening, and so he didn't manage to get the Clash signed, and he didn't manage to sign the Pistols, but he got the Banshees and he got the Jam, so, he was at least aware,
Right.
And that's really why they let him produce stuff,
How old was he at the time?
He was probably, I think he was like 10 years old now, so he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s,
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, of course, Tony Wilson, the visionary up north, also, is about 10 years older than the rest of them.
And I think that's very true in a lot of cases at that time. There was a lot of people who like you say, like Tony Wilson, it's like they'd seen some things go through, but they weren't so old as to be distant from that particular process, and they could see something was changing and going on, and they were there to capitalise on it, and help it grow. Right.
I wanted to ask you, because I brought in some unofficial Peel sessions by the band, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about your interaction with John Peel, because I think your first session was dates to December '78. I mean, that's before you'd put any records out.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, because we'd always liked Peel, and he'd heard about us, and we sent him the first copies of things before they were out, and he said, "Okay, come down and do a session. Do one of my radio sessions," and it was really good. And then we actually met him the first time at Reading Festival. We played Reading Festival that year, and he was like introducing bands and stuff. And we met him, and it was good because he was really, in the same way as Rodney Bingenheim here. He was like the champion of that particular era of music, and without him, it wouldn't have happened, and people wouldn't have heard of it. And so it was very good. I think I talked to Robert few weeks ago, and I think a lot of the Peel sessions this next year are coming out. He's redoing them at the moment. So.
This was on my list too, because last year there was rumor of a BBC box set, and it seems so overdue because there are many tracks that actually didn't get released, and very different. Like the version of Primary has totally different verses, and it's a different song.
Yeah.
So how? Well, invasive isn't the right word because that has a negative connotation, but how involved was Peel in the producing of the sessions? Like, say... He's
never involved with it. He likes who he has sessions with. I don't think you ever had a session unless he was a fan of yours.
Sure.
But his producer would be the guy that would be overseeing all the sessions, and Peel would never come to the sessions himself. No.
I see. And how did you guys feel about, say the production of the sessions, which are definitely more raw than the Perry produced?
It was an interesting
that
thing.
First era.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing for us because. A lot of the time, the BBC is still stuck in I don't know if it is now, but at the time it was still stuck very much in a sort of old school kind of mentality. They had these beautiful studios, state of the art, and they would always mix down onto this tiny little speaker because that's what they thought everybody was going to listen to it on the radio, and... Also, it was a bit of a conveyor belt, because you get in there and you have like 8 hours to record 4 songs, and everything has to be done and everything has to be mixed, and because if you don't, everybody's going home.
Oh, so it was you recorded it, and so the 8 hours
right
was
there
all
on the spot. Yeah, it's all done within about a period of about 6 to 8 hours. So the first time, we were pretty practiced at our stuff, so we could do it quick. But as over the years, as we did more of them, sometimes it could be a little fraught because you don't really have very much time to polish anything up at all, But that's probably its charm as well.
Yeah, for sure, and it definitely serves some bands better than others.
Yeah.
I think it served you guys really well.
Yeah, I think it worked out all right because at that time it highlighted what it would be like to come and see us play, because that's how we sounded live. How you heard it on the radio. that was pretty much what you got when you came to see us. So people like that.
Right. I want to play. Actually, I think I want to. Let me look here. I got on the computer. I was thinking I would play the second session that you guys did, which would have been September 5th, 79.
79. Okay.
And I know that it has. It's 5 tracks, and the first one, at least in the sequence on my computer here, is "Desperate Journalist" and an ongoing. So what's?
I'll tell you the story.
Yeah,
about
what's the story?
Well, the first album was out, Three Imaginary Boys, and we got some good reviews in some of the newspapers, and the NME, which was really the sort of what they thought they were like the uber intellectual paper of the music of the time. They had a journalist, Paul Morley, right, and he basically took it upon himself to decide why we had made this record and why we were very pretentious, and I don't mind criticism if it's true, because there's some valid criticism about the band over the years, but this was so far off the mark from somebody who had no idea who we were that it was, I don't know, it just felt very gratuitous. So we made a song up about it, and that's what that is.
See, I was almost guessing it was Dave McCullough, which is another
well,
journalist
Dave
who likes
McCullough was all right to us. He liked us, yeah. Dave McCullough liked us, and Ian Penman, and the other one, he sort of went in and out. Sometimes he liked us, and sometimes he didn't. Right. But the first person that ever wrote about The Cure for one of the major papers was Adrian Thrills. Do you ever remember reading him? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he came down to see us play outside of London, which was unheard of at the time. No self-respecting music journalist was going to step outside of the sound of Bow Bells if they could help it, and he actually bothered to come and see us, so that was something on his side. But this song's about Paul Morley, who I've met since a few times, and he's been okay about it all, but
he's had a long career.
Well, he's had a long career, and the truth is, what he thought about us was not true. So there you go.
All right. So I'm going to play you the session. I don't know if this was the proper order as Peel did it, but "Desperate Journalist" in an ongoing. What's the full title? Ongoing situation. Grinding Halt, Subway Song, Plastic Passion, and Accuracy. All right, and it's sum total of about 13 minutes, I think.
Okay.
So Dave McCullough, this is for you. You're listening to Part Time Punk's radio show. I'm your host, Michael Stock, and Lowell Tolhurst from The Cure is in the studio here with me. Give us a call on the listener line if you have some questions, and stay tuned for more Cure fun. I have a very special guest here in the studio. His name is Lowell Tolhurst. He was founding member of The Cure, drummer, keyboard player.
All of the above. Yeah.
All of the above. So, and what you just heard was the second Peel session in its entirety by The Cure, recorded in, the date I have here is September 5th, 1979. So back.
Sounds right.
Does that sound about right? Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't actually swear to it, but it sounds right there.
Right. Yeah. Well, how many years ago was that?
Jeez. A long time.
31 years ago. Yeah. So we heard Accuracy, Plastic Passion, Subway Song, Grinding Halt, and Desperate Journalist in an ongoing. Let me look at my iTunes here. It's not. Oh, yes. In an ongoing, meaningful review situation. Yeah. That's the whole title. And that goes out to Dave McCullough. Dave, thanks for your consistency and your high level of journalism. So, cool. Welcome back. Oh, and I should tell you guys, by the way, this is all sort of in preparation for this Sunday night at the Echo. Have put together a sort of tribute to The Cure night, and my guest here, Lowell, is going to come guest DJ. So, and.
Yes, I'm going to be spinning those wheels of steel. Well, actually, no wheels of steel for me. It all comes from the laptop, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
He will be. What is the program called?
Tractor. Yeah, my friends actually make that program in Native Instruments. So.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've got a few friends who use it. I'm like an analog Luddite.
Right.
So I'll be plunking the scratchy plastic on.
I dealt with all the analog Luddites in the. Actually, there's some analog things that are pretty good, like modular synths. But
I did want to ask you that. Let's actually jump ahead a little bit, just because you have always been an innovator in terms of the technology that you have brought into the music from The Cure, and certainly still with Levvenhurst. And I wonder if, because I read about the modular synth, are you using that yet, or is it still a project?
No. I had one modular synths. You have to have custom built because they're like one of a kind, and so I have one. It sits in my garage home studio and makes lots of weird noises all the time. So yeah, I mean it's a bit of a beast. It's a bit uncontrollable, but that's half the fun.
Right. I wondered too. I wondered about your current music making. If you are using any other analog gear, or if is it digital stuff, computer based stuff, or
it's funny because the first stuff we started off with Levvenhurst was basically a lot of electronic samplers and laptops and machines and that, and then lately we've become completely organic again, with just like a sort of a little dosing of electronica over the top of it. We've just, we went out on our last tour and I played the drums, and Michael's playing bass, so we have a guitar and sing. It's absolutely as straightforward as you can get. But I subscribe to the theory that Brian Eno espoused some time ago. He said, since, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, since the Second World War, all music's been electronic because, you hear it over the radio or through a speaker of some sort. People don't come with an acoustic guitar and sit in front of you and play the music. So, I think that's true to a certain extent, but I don't know. I like to have the versatility to be able to play with certain things. With The Cure, I brought in a lot of the electronic stuff because when we first started, we were a basic 3-piece band. But over the years, we brought in like little things like syn drums, and then we sort of had different synths and different sound-making stuff. And, that really was my responsibility, in the first place. So it was a lot of fun.
So was the syn drum the first sort of piece of electronic equipment that you
pretty much
worked with?
And it was kind of hard to maintain as well because of the way it was constructed. Right now thank you. Right now I just got a nice glass of water.
Nico is in the studio here reading Archie comics and just delivering some water.
Yes, it's very kind of her. I now have an arrangement with some guys actually here in LA that make this drum called the Mandela drum, and I think who's the guy in Tool? Yeah, he uses it, and it's like a multifaceted instrument that you can play just from a drum pad, and it's really beautiful. But back in the day, this first syn drum was like this one pad that had a speaker under it, and you hit it, and the speaker vibrated and triggered the mono synth that's inside of it, and that was all right. That lasted for about half a tour before it just fell apart because the design really wasn't designed that well, but
right. I mean, I when I think of the syn drum, of course, think of you guys and Joy Division, of course, being the main proponents of that piece of technology, or at least you guys used it the best.
Well, thank you. We, I think more than anything, The Cure started because we were friends that were interested in doing something together. I mean, if we hadn't have been musically inclined, it would have been furniture removal or something. But we would have done something together. And so actually, even as early on as the second album, 17 Seconds, we tried swapping around instruments and playing different things together, which we realised didn't work completely, that we should probably stick to what we knew a little bit, and so we did.
Right. We had a listener call in who has always owned the Cult Hero single. Right. Didn't know, but always suspected there was Cure involvement in it. And I know that the tracks from it pop up on the Rhino reissue of 17 Seconds. So could you tell the story of how the whole story came together? What it is?
We have a friend, Frankie Bell, who was a sort of semi-famous wrestler called the Black Hat, and he'd always had a hankering to be a singer, and so one night we decided, well, let's call Frank up and we'll write a song for him. And so over a few bottles of wine, I think probably we wrote a song, and we had Frank come and sing it, and we just had a party in the studio and made a song, and then we decided, well, to promote that song, we should play some gigs. So we learnt the top 10 from about 1973 of one particular week, and we played all those songs. We learnt them all and played them in our own style, and we opened for some other bands, I don't know, in the Marquee, and we had Frank come on and sing his song, and I think everybody was particularly bemused, because they realised it was The Cure, but they weren't really sure what we were pretending to do, and but it was fun. So
does a recording exist of that gig? I would be.
I sincerely hope not, because it was probably awful. But apart from Frankie's performance, obviously. But I don't know. I think they did a reprise of that a few years ago. They did some gigs in London, and Frank came and sang.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's still got it. He can still do it.
Wow. And this was how long after Three Imaginary Boys and those recordings?
I think it's probably about the same time. Just somewhere in between there and 17 Seconds, we got horribly warped.
Right. So would you consider it a novelty single?
It's not on the same sort of line as the Laughing Gnome by David Bowie, but I think it's less novelty. But yes, it was a one-off for fun. I mean, an interesting story which I told you about in the break was a few years ago. I was in my house here, and I suddenly heard it on the TV, and I thought, what's that on? And it was on an advert for Monster.com, and it was in the middle of the Super Bowl. So, I mean, 30 years later, the song actually got some kind of recognition.
And the B-side, no less.
It was a B-side,
right?
Yeah, it was I Dig You, it was very funny. So you never know what's going to happen with what you record.
Right. The tracks, and we're going to get to them, I'm going to play both of them in just a second, but if anything, it reminds me a little bit of the, what is it? It's the B. Is it I'm Cold? The B-side of
right,
which also has this 60s. I mean, real 60s psychedelic tint
and
to
that
it.
was
Jumping Someone Else's Train.
Yeah, and that was partly to do with what the things we were listening to, because we were listening to the contemporary punk stuff of our time, but we were also listening to some of the earlier 60s things, because we would sneak into. Robert has a brother, actually, who I met again last year. I hadn't seen him for many years, and we used to call his brother the Guru. That was his nickname. And the Guru had lots of records of all kinds of obscure, 13th Floor Elevator, all kinds of weird things, and the Fugs, and we would go in there and listen to them. So it had to come out in the music somewhere.
It's a good place for it. I mean, and when I say novelty single, you should understand that I rate this thing up there with, like, Jilted John. I mean, it's like...
Jilted John was brilliant. I heard that again about 3 weeks ago, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's funny, one of the things that I like about YouTube is you can find all of these things on YouTube, and I regularly, befuddle my wife, I think, by showing her these things and trying to explain to her what made it so funny at the time. She's a Californian girl, so she gets some of it, but not all of it, but thankfully she indulges me.
Right.
So, yeah.
Very good. All right, I'm going to play, we're going to play both sides. I'm going to play it off the CD here, so there'll be a slight gap in between of the single by Cult Hero, sort of the Secret Cure single, much valued among collectors. The A side is called "I'm a Cult Hero," and it's followed by "I Dig You." And we'll leave it for you listeners to decide. A very special guest in the studio here today. His name is Lowell Tolhurst.
Hi, how you doing?
Greetings. Lowell is a founding member of a band called The Cure that you may have heard along the way. You may have also heard that band, which was another band that he was in, and along with all his mates in The Cure, a band called Cult Hero, and that was "I Dig You," and before that, "I'm a Cult Hero," which is the A side of the only single you guys...
Only recording ever done. There was never a Cult Hero album.
No, yeah. And that was you singing background vocals, you said?
Yeah. I think that's back in my drinking days where I thought I could sing, so...
Very cool. And if you're into that, it's a very rare single to find. It's always been very collectible among Cure fans. I don't know how many there were. 1,000 maybe?
Not a lot. No. I mean, I have a whole bunch in my garage, but I'm
really because I don't have any. So I have a bootleg of it. I must. Aw, very nice. Very cool. And that was a single that came between the first and second records.
Yeah, pretty much. We did some other singles, and we had a bit of time on our hands, a bit of studio time, and we were young and unaffected, so we decided, yes, well, seems perfectly reasonable idea. Much to, I think, the horror of our manager at the time, Chris Parry. I think he was like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to make a record with one of your friends? Oh, okay. He really thought we were a bit crazy, but he went along with it. Bless him.
Right. Now, so were you guys fans of wrestling in general, or was this just a friend of yours who was a wrestler?
Happened to do, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he was very useful, because when we first, I don't want to sound too mercenary, but when we first started playing, we played some shows, and because we had, some people would come and see us mistakenly thinking we were sort of a different kind of band, and so we would get some, skinhead set out at our show, and it always helped to have Frankie right at front and centre. Being as he was this professional wrestling fellow, and
sure.
He loved us, and if any trouble happened, well, Frank would just make sure that it didn't go on for very long. So that's why we thought it was a good person to make a record with.
Very cool. We're gonna jump ahead a bit in time, but I do at least want to, segue into discussion of the importance of electronic music. And I read somewhere that you have an extensive collection of electronic music.
It's sort of, instead of being a what they would call in England a train spotter, instead of having a hobby like that, my hobby has always been the more avant-garde electronic musicians, mainly because once I discovered you could make all these sounds with different kinds of electronic circuits, then I was intrigued by it, and I'm not sure if anybody really, well, I'm sure there are people that know it, but here on this side of America where we live, the founder of modern electronic music is still alive up in Berkeley in California, Buechler. He was inventing modern synthesis along the same time as Robert Moog, who was much more famous, but he still makes glorious machines. They're very expensive, but very, very good. It's my ambition, my life's ambition, to own one. So
to own a piece, yeah.
It's just to me, it was. Here's the parallel. Here's the reason why. Because people might not associate the Cure, electronic music. For me, electronic music in its early days was very much like punk. It was do it yourself, and people were making sounds out of stuff that they found.
Sure. That
wasn't necessarily designed to make musical sounds, and they made music out of it. And I found that very intriguing. So.
Right, and of course, places like Sheffield, especially, where the guitar was frowned upon at a very early stage in the evolution of punk. So,
it's a different kind of thing, and I like that. The experimental idea of it all, and freed us up for a long time.
And at what point did the interest and even the collection start? Like, was it in 78, 79? I mean, because obviously the sound of the Cure, soon you shift to keyboards. So.
And a lot of that was to do with the fact that at that time there was a lot of interesting, sort of electronic sampling machines and stuff coming along. So I was kind of interested in doing that way. No, my interest in it started earlier than that, when I was a boy, because my uncle was like a radio ham sort of radio enthusiast, and he would make all these shortwave recordings, and I found them fascinating, how you could record just like what was static for hours and hours, and then put little bits together, and it might actually be like a little tune or something. And it was like, to me, it was like found music, and I know people have done stuff like that since, but it always intrigued me. So it's like, for me, I have that's where my real love is. making sound out of nothing, making art out of nothing, you know.
Mm. And when you after you stopped playing with The Cure, which is around 89?
89, yes, 89
or so, and Jump Ship. And how many? You took some time off, right? You did a record. Yeah. You did a record with.
I made a couple of albums as a band that I put together called Presents, and then I had a bit more time off, and I started Levvenhurst up. So, which is what I'm doing right now, still.
What and how when you returned to making music, again, it was definitely the DIY approach. I mean, you started making all these things yourself, starting out of electronic sounds.
Right, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was. I got to a point where I really didn't want to go sort of the old route. I wanted to try out, start something again new, and it seemed to be a natural process to do it, sort of a bit more to do it yourself, you know. Yeah, so definitely.
Good. And what year was it that you started Levvenhurst?
Levvenhurst is 2004. Yeah, 2004, I think. Yeah.
And at that point, it was you and your wife that was in
me
the
and my wife. Yeah, that's it. Cindy. Yes, she just sent me a text actually. So that's why I'm looking down here at the same time as I'm trying to speak to you, Michael. So, yes. It was funny because I had all these songs, and I was sitting there thinking, these songs really need somebody to sing them. Who can I have sing them? And the truth was sitting there right in front of my face, because Cindy would always sing around the house, and I think, okay, would you like to sing these songs? And she sang them, and I realised, yes, this is my singer, this is the person that we need for this. And so it started out me and her, and then over the years we've sort of had some little difference in incarnations. We started with a guy called Dayton Borders, and he was there for like one album, and then we have at the moment Eric Bradley, who lives here in Los Angeles, a native of Chicago, played with people like Jerry Cantrell, and so a very, very good guitarist, and but we have this. The core of it is myself and Cindy, and also this time round as well, we've added my old friend Michael Dempsey, the original bass player of The Cure. So things come full circle,
Right. Yeah. Very cool. And I guess, so what I want to do next is play a couple Levvenhurst songs. Right. We're going to play one off of the first record, is that right?
Well, this is actually the second record.
This is the second record.
House by the Sea. So this is actually a picture of around here somewhere, but you probably don't know where, because it was changed quite a lot. I'm showing Michael the front cover.
It's at dusk.
Yeah. This is sort of like a very personal album to myself and Cindy, I think. The first one, which you're going to be playing second, is a more electronic kind of album. So you'll see the difference between them.
Okay, so we're going to hear a couple tracks by Levvenhurst, which is Lalt Tolhurst's current band, and then we're going to talk a little bit more, and then we're going to play some weird early electronic stuff of which I know nothing about, and I get to be the student here in the studio for a change, which I'm looking forward to. So, what's the name of this track that we're playing? Levvenhurst track?
Never Gonna Dream Again.
Never Going to Dream Again. All right. So you're listening to Part-Time Punk's radio show here on KXLU. You're listening to the sound of modular synthesis here on KXLU 88.9, Part-Time Punk's radio show, which is to say the sound of Lalt Tolhurst's modular synth there.
Right, my mod can, my custom-built mod can. Very for cool. All you aficionados out there.
Okay, that is his band called Levvenhurst, and that last track we heard is called Mau Mau off of their most recent record,
Blue Star.
Blue Star. And before that we heard a track off of the first record?
No, the second record. House by the Sea, yeah.
Cool, and the track was called Never Going to Dream Again.
Right.
So, and Lal is spending the afternoon here with me playing tracks.
Very pleasant afternoon it is too.
Thanks for coming in. So we, how did this come together? There's a chap that listens to the radio show,
right,
who is a good friend of yours, actually, who I guess put us in touch. And you have to tell me his name because my brain is blanking on it.
Well, there's Jeff and there's Kevin, and both good friends of mine, and they said, "Oh, you should go talk talk up there. It's a great show. And so I listened to it, and I thought, yes, it sounds very good. It's what I would like. And I was very grateful, not grateful, what's the word? I was very pleased this afternoon when I'm driving over here to hear that you do actually play the TV Personalities song at the beginning of the show, because that's one of my favourite songs of all time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, and in fact, yeah, one of my personal goals for the radio show and for the club is, of course, to have television personalities play.
Yeah.
And Dan Tracy, he wants to come play, but of course there's an arrest record, and so there's some question as to whether he can come.
Yeah.
So, but it means a lot to me that he's supportive and wants to come, which would be, I would have to end the club at that point if he ever played. It would just It would
you could have modern technology. You could have a video conferencing and have him on. Not actually be here, but be here, sort of,
Yeah, we could. Yeah, at least on the radio show here. Yeah. So, and Lal is coming down to guest DJ with me. Speaking of which, at the Echo this Sunday night.
Yep. Sunday night.
It starts at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. When will I be on? I don't even know what time.
I don't know. We'll sort that out. I mean, we can work in any number of ways. If you want to do a couple of short sets, if you want to do one longer set, we can totally work it out. So, but you should come down early and set up the tractor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Set
up my tractor and ride it around the club for a few times.
Don't miss that.
Yeah, that's a very bizarre joke there. Yeah,
don't miss that. And of course, it will be very Cure-centric night, but also contemporary.
Cure stuff. There'll also be all the people that inspired the Cure at times. So you're going to be hearing the Buzzcocks. You'll hear the Stranglers. You'll hear a few people like that, and a few other weirdos. So it'll be interesting.
Cool. That will be very fun. So come down and join us. So your current band, Levvenhurst, I see that you're about to hit the road again.
Oh yeah.
What's the plan?
We just finished a tour in Europe. Playing in Holland, Poland, Italy, and Germany, and we're going back to play in Italy and Germany again in a few weeks, and then I believe we're heading to South America. And we had a chat before, Michael and I, that we would like to play some shows here in America where I live. So that's going to come to fruition very shortly too, as well.
Very cool. And what's the plan as far as, are there more tracks in the can, or when are you guys recording next?
I have with me on one of those little USB sticks, I have the only track that we have done since Blue Star, and nobody's heard it yet, not a single person, and it's going to be released on a compilation in England, I think in September, but nobody's heard it yet, and it's called Seeds Are Sown, so we might be able to put that into your laptop.
Good thing I brought the laptop. We'll play that for sure.
Okay. That's the latest Levvenhurst song.
Very good. So I had emailed this idea came into my brain at about 12:30, 1:30. I'm not sure what time I emailed you last night.
Yeah, it was late.
It was late. In fact, but you were still up, so that was cool.
I was still up, yes.
But I'd asked if you could bring in at least. I mean, obviously you can't bring your 78s in, but at least bring in some recordings of some early electronic music.
Right.
So, and I see a stack of...
Yeah, I have a stack of CDs here. This is the stuff that I annoy my wife with. She's not a great fan of this. Cindy's more, 1970s, 1980s obscure. I don't know what you would call it. Obscure Americana. That's what she listens to. But occasionally I make her listen to this stuff.
Good. Well, actually, the timing is perfect because you realize there are so many thousands of people in their cars right now, and we can mess with them all with some of the tracks that we're about to play.
Yeah,
so
we'll definitely mess with them.
But of course, listeners to the show are familiar with the sort of weirdness that happens here, and
most of the people that are not familiar with it are going to try and retune their radio in the car. I think something's happened. Yeah.
So, and I'm very happy to inform all of you listeners that that. As of right now, I'm not the only Throbbing Gristle fan in the studio. So
Genesis Peorage is pretty much, well, hasn't he turned into a woman now?
Yes. She is. Yes,
she is. Yes, yeah. So he's a very interesting character. And I did see Throbbing Gristle one time, and they were great.
Did you guys didn't play any gigs with?
No. Me and Robert went down and saw them at the ICA or somewhere like that in London years ago, and we saw Echo and the Bunnymen with no drummer, but when they just had a drum machine, and so cool. I've seen them all.
Very cool. Well, so tell us a little bit about what I've got queued up here.
Well, this is a guy who's an American, back from the 40s or 50s, I believe, and he was a guy who made... he worked for Hanna-Barbera or one of those animators and just basically made sort of the audio stuff for them, but he wanted to make music, so he wasn't really a musician, so he decided, well, he'd tape hours and hours of shortwave radio transmissions across the globe, and he made music out of it. Some might not think it's music, but I find it musical.
And so, I mean, he was probably splicing tape.
Yeah, lots of tapes and stuff together, and trying, put them through weird filters that they had at the time. And to me, it's very punk, really.
Cool. Okay, so the artist is called Todd Dockstader?
I think that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The track is called Apocalypse Part 2. So and it originates from 1961. So
61, yes. I was, wow, 2. Yeah.
All right, so this one goes way back, and this is definitely a first here on Part-Time Punk's radio show, all right? And stay tuned, by the way. I am definitely, before we're done here at 6 o'clock, I'm going to play very rare stuff, the Cure's Peel session from 81, which was from the Pornography era, and it's not available anywhere. So very special stuff. Stay tuned here. But now, enjoy some utter weirdness on KXLU. You are listening to KXLU 88.9 FM and KXLU.com. This is Part-Time Punk's radio show. I'm your host, Michael Stock. I have a very special guest in the studio here. His name is Lol Tolhurst.
Hello out there, radio listeners.
He's here. He was making the last batch of weirdo selections, if I do say so myself. So, yeah. First of all, what you're hearing in the background, by the way, if you don't know it, is actually a track by The Cure, a 28-minute instrumental called Carnage Visors. Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, but I want to fill people in on what we just heard. You can hear it in the background here. I usually don't do that, but...
So that today it seems appropriate.
It does seem appropriate. It would be more appropriate if the clouds came in, actually. Right. But probably not hope for that till about November. Let's see. Before that, we heard brand new stuff from Levvenhurst, a track called Seeds Are Sown?
Seeds Are Sown, yes. Seeds Are Sown.
And is the track finished, or it's demo?
It's finished, and it's going to be out on a compilation called GR4 on Jungle in about September, I think.
Oh, cool. Forthcoming track then, and this is the first time anyone in the world has heard it.
First time anyone in the world's ever heard it, besides us.
Outside of the family, of course. Let's see, before that we heard Holger Čuke.
Yeah. I think that's how you pronounce it.
I've never known.
It's Hungarian, isn't it, or something, so.
Right.
He was in Cannes, that's what I know, and I love Cannes, so.
Yeah, likewise. That track was called Boat Woman's Song. Do you know what record that's from?
I have absolutely no idea what record that's from. I mean, I just have it on my nice little compilation here that you're eyeing up. Ohm.
Yeah, that Ohm comp is very cool.
It's very good.
Very good. I snuck some Throbbing Gristle there in between because I finally got that record on vinyl. So.
Yeah, it's a very good record too.
Beachy Head was the name of that track. Before that, we heard SPK doing Slow Gun, and the set of weirdo electronic minimalism started off with Todd Dockstader doing Apocalypse Part 2 from 1962, which was amazing. I need more of his work.
Okay, I shall see.
It's totally down with it.
What we have.
So, in the background here, you're hearing a track that for a long time was only available as the flip side of a cassette.
Yeah, it was on the back of a cassette. Absolutely.
Was it Faith?
I think it was Faith. Yeah, it was on the B side of Faith. I mean, because originally we made this because we decided on tour we didn't want to have an opening band as such because we felt that was too much like 1960s kind of show band thing. So we thought, well, to create a different atmosphere, we'll make a movie. Simon Gallup, his brother, Rick Gallup, made us this animated movie that was pretty long. About half an hour long, and one night we had in I think the Point Studios. My goodness, my memory's good. The Point Studios in London. We spent one night and we just recorded the whole thing in one go. And
so it's a jam.
Yes, it's a jam. It's a jam with the drum machine. But yeah, so we just did one big long thing and recorded this track, and we watched the film as we were doing it. You know, we were trying to be a little professional, watch the film at the same time, and then we would play it before the shows, and it was a great indicator of how our audience was going to be. Because
what year? I'm sorry. What year was this? For which tour was it?
Oh, I would say it was the beginning of. Oh, excuse me, Faith. I think so. That's 81. Yeah. So it was 81. So it was a great indicator of how our audience was going to be, because most of them, after 10 minutes of watching this, they would shift uneasily in their seats. After 20 minutes, they would be kind of a bit more vociferous, and things would start to fly at the stage. By 30 minutes, they were going insane. So we come on stage, and it was like a big relief. I think to a lot of people, because
Can you describe? Because I've never seen even an image from the film. What was it?
It's an animated story. That's about as far as I'm prepared to go.
All right. So, but did it have any narrative, or was
it's kind of it was very existentialist, to be honest. It was the story of every man, but it was represented by this strange animated character. But yeah, it was Prometheus and everything all rolled into one.
Very good. So, and actually on the break, I shared with Lol another thought that I had at about 1:30 last night. Because one of my questions was if you still had a copy of the film.
Right. Yes, I did have a copy, and I say have a copy because I'm not sure if I have it anymore. When I moved here from England in about 1994, I possessed a copy at my father's house. My father died, and the copy is not transferred all the way over here to California, so I'm not sure, but maybe I could dig one up somewhere.
So, because my idea, and I told all this, is that for the last 2 years, I've been me and the folks from Silent Movie Theater have put on a post-punk film festival. It happens in the spring. So my idea was how amazing it would be to actually screen Carnage Visors. Yeah. And then maybe show in Orange, right? The concert or something.
There's in Orange as well. Yeah.
Because I don't know if that hasn't been screened in years.
It hasn't, and it's not out yet on DVD.
That's right, it's not on DVD.
Although Robert's promising me it's out this year. 2011. Yeah.
So stay tuned, folks. We have now connected, and I have it in my craw that this should happen, and that Lol should come play perhaps as well.
Levvenhurst would love to play. So it'd be great.
Stay tuned for details on that. I guess I'm curious now that we've heard the Levvenhurst stuff. We've heard some of the electronic music that's inspired you. Right. I guess I've always wondered how much importance there was in terms of the shift in the music of The Cure when you shifted to keyboards. Like, did you change to keyboards and then the rest of the band shifted? Or I know it's hard to.
Yeah, it's really hard to say what came first. It's a kind of a chicken or the egg thing, because at the time we were very aware. That there was a lot of new stuff coming up. This is like the early 80s. A lot of new stuff, ways of making music with different electronic stuff that had never existed before. So we wanted to make ourselves available to all that kind of technology, and that's where, that was my role, because I'd always had a little interest in it. And we decided at the time, okay, well, the rest of the band, and I don't think they'll think I'm being unfair if I say this, are fairly Luddite in their approach to stuff, making music. If you couldn't hit it or slap it or spank it, they weren't really interested in it. So that was my job, so I brought the computer in the studio in the first time, and brought all the different electronic bits and pieces, and we would, from there, we would use them to write, because they're a different palette of sounds, and we had some of the very first sort of prototype instruments. In fact, I remember some of them came from over here, actually, from California, and they were vastly expensive at the time. Nowadays you could probably get them with a packet of cornflakes, but we were interested in using them, and it kind of gave us a little edge and something different in sound-wise. So, it was still obviously us at the end of it, but we'd used we weren't afraid of using different things. We weren't terribly purist,
And what of course, the top is a real dramatic shift,
right?
And is definitely keyboard based. But I think, with you're using keyboards before that, and certainly on Pornography.
Yeah, in Pornography, there was definitely the start of the shift towards the change. I mean, there was a big thundering drum sound, but there was also a lot of keyboards and a lot of kind of experimentation on things like A Strange Day. A lot of that was we recorded a lot of loops on tape. And we would play them on like all the tracks on the mixing desk and use it as a sort of sort of an ad hoc keyboard instead of playing it from a keyboard like you would nowadays, or a mellotron, which is what people used to use before with like tape loops. We used the whole mixing desk as a big keyboard. So which was. At least we were trying different things, and we'd always been about doing that. I mean, when we made 17 Seconds, there's a couple of tracks on there. We looped the drums physically from tape reels. We'd stretch a big long tape reel around two machines in the studio, and the tape reel would run for about 35 seconds or whatever, and we'd have a complete loop of something because we wanted to make it really regimented, And so we'd always been interested in doing weird things.
It's interesting because the keyboard sound, which is sort of definitely a defining sound of The Cure, which wasn't there at the beginning, and when it was there, when it was first introduced, it was it wasn't industrial, but it was definitely hard-edged, very experimental use of keyboard in the sort of...
Yeah, we also, we had our favourites as well, because we had originally this old Selena string machine, but and it only had one sound, and it weighed about 200 pounds, and it made one sound, but you couldn't make nothing else I ever found made that sound. Completely, you couldn't sample it; it didn't sound right. It was just this one machine with sort of like I often listen to. I was reading about Trent Reznor was saying how he wanted to introduce a lot of machines that he played that had something a little wrong with them, because the thing that was wrong with them was what made them attractive to play, and I know that absolutely. In fact, I still have at the moment. I think my son's taken it out on his tour. I have this little $10 keyboard Bontempi that the fan inside this machine is so loud that it virtually obscures the notes, but when you press the note and have the sound of the fan at the same time, it's beautiful. It only makes one sound, but it's beautiful, So most people would look at it or listen to it and think, oh, it's broken. But to me, I find beauty in the broken, Yeah.
Good. Well, and that definitely, still ties The Cure and your attitude to punk, to the legacy of punk. And,
right, absolutely.
And
it's about making what you can, making art out of everything.
I wanted to ask, too, just for a second, to ask a little bit about style, because of course the darkness of the band, musically speaking, precedes by at least 2 or 3 records the shift in aesthetics.
Yes,
and so I've always wondered, because I must confess I did grow up with Cure posters on my walls.
Okay.
You should know. But I wondered, the defining look, Robert's big hair, your big hair, the trench coats and so on. Yeah. Where, how was that a conscious decision? How did that get introduced into?
I don't know. Most of it evolved, and some of the style. We had some friends who were designers. Started at St Martin's Art College and stuff, and we had a guy called John Flett. He made us some suits for stage, and that became sort of part and parcel of our look as well. So we were always very interested when we had the ability to, because obviously at the beginning we didn't have the ability, but when we had some kind of success, we wanted to help other people, like whether it be in film or ballet, because we did some stuff with Nicholas Dixon. Or our friend John Flett, who was a designer, we wanted to help him with his clothing thing. So we would, like the old days, I guess, we would be patrons of the arts. So we'd say, well, rather than pay somebody that we don't know to do, make us a wardrobe, and it might not necessarily fit in with what we think about, we'll get something made by somebody we know and we like what they do, and they will make something that's sympathetic. We don't have to be sitting there on top of them all the time telling them. So that's really how a lot of that stuff evolved, and it was an aesthetic that we kind of sort of built gradually, bit by bit, and then it became that look, and that became very much associated with us.
Right, because I've read in a number of interviews, you and Robert both sort of, when a finger is pointed at the Cure and says you are a gothic band, and both of you being like, no, we're not.
No, we were never really gothic like that. I mean, you have to go on the goth cruise to find out the real gothic bands. But I don't know. We had a sensibility that was on the darker side, but that didn't mean that we were gothic or even that sort of hopeless in a way. We were a little bit more on the absurd style, I think, than gothic. But
right. I don't know if I read it or if my brain just made it up, but at some point I read reference that how Closer, Joy Division's record Closer, and of course the passing of Ian Curtis had a big influence on your songwriting, and of course with Faith, 17 Seconds and Faith coming out after that, it definitely, those records certainly all fit together in a certain aesthetic. I wondered if that was
I think there's a truth to it, but I don't think it's in such a conscious way. I mean, I think, like everybody who starts a band, you have things that you think are sympathetic to what you're doing, and definitely we felt they're very sympathetic to the style that we have, and there's going to be some cross-pollination whatever goes on, and it was just something that appealed to us. I don't think it would have been any different if they weren't there. I think we would have stumbled a lot on the same path anyway, But it was definitely a time there, especially around the time of Faith, that there was a lot of bad things that happened in our lives. Robert's grandmother died, my mother died when I was on tour, and so we had, there was definitely going to be a lot of questioning going on, because always the music of the Cure was an extension to our lives. It was the diary. If you're listening to those songs, you're listening to our diary. That's our journal right there.
Right. I mean, the band is, the band, of course, is huge now, and and has had such a history. But so it's easy, I think, to forget that these songs were all very personal songs, especially from that era, from '81
especially
to
from
'83.
that era, all the way up to Pornography, and probably beyond. They're excessively personal. They are little vignettes of our lives, and it's funny because I started playing some of those songs in my set with Levvenhurst. I started playing some of the early songs. I've been re-listening to the early albums, which I might not have listened to for a long time, and it takes me right back to the situations that revolved around our lives at the time and made it that way. And I understand why it's difficult for other people to listen to them and kind of figure out where we were and how things happened. But to me, it was my life, so it's very straightforward for me. People say, "Well, how did you think of this and how do you think of that?" Well, for me, it was more of a question of what we didn't put in, what we couldn't put in, what we failed to do that we had to do on the next album. So
I want to play next. I want to play the Peel session from '81, because it's three tracks that were eventually released in different form on Pornography. And I know that you, in every interview I've ever read, always cite Pornography as being your favorite record.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wondered if that is it musically or lyrically, or
both.
Just wondering.
Both. It's musically and lyrically. It's my favorite, because to me it's far more it's the distillation of everything I thought the Cure was about. It's the most perfect of all the albums we made that actually speaks clearly to me about where we were and what we were doing, and we meant it. We meant it completely when we did it. And obviously as you get older, some things are not quite so clear to me anymore, but at the time it was definitely, we felt it, we lived it, and we breathed it, and that was us. And for in my mind, there's a couple of versions of the Cure. There's a, sort of the earlier version, the 3-piece, and to me, and the later version, which was a bit more pop. The 3-piece version, that was the crystallization of everything the 3-piece could do. The Pornography.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's listen to this. I'm going to play you all 3 tracks here. It's Siamese Twins, 100 Years, and Figurehead, and the quality's not A+, but hey, we have to wait until Robert gives the thumbs up on the BBC box set, I guess.
Yeah, he's promised me that he's going to do that for this next year coming up. So all those people out there that are waiting for that, it's going to happen.
Cool. So in the meantime, you can hear these tracks exclusively here, unless you have the bootlegs yourself, of course. And this is Part-Time Punk's radio show, and you're listening to me hanging out in the studio here with Lol Tolhurst from The Cure, discussing 30-plus year history of music making.
Yes, 30 years of madness, I prefer to call it.
Of madness. All right. So, all right, this is The Cure. This is from a session recorded December 21st, 1981 on Part-Time Punk's radio show, KXLU. I have a very special guest here in the studio today. His name is Lol Tolhurst.
Hello there, Radioland listeners.
Lol was founding member of The Cure, played drums, played keyboard, was in the band from 76 to
89, yeah, long time. From the first album all the way up to Disintegration.
So, and what we just heard there was a Peel session. I think it's the band's 4th Peel session from the Pornography era. 3 tracks: Figurehead, before that 100 Years, and Siamese Twins. And you were wondering how you guys managed to actually lay down some of those tracks during the limited time of a Peel session.
Yeah, they don't give you very much time in the BBC to record those songs. So I mean, I'm actually quite impressed with myself that they sound halfway decent for having a few hours to record them. Yeah.
Very cool. And do you know how many sessions did you guys do?
I've no idea. This year, Robert's going to go through them all and comb them out and remaster them and make them sound a bit nicer and put them out again. So there's enough there to do quite a lot with. Yeah.
And did you do like David Jensen sessions and
I think we probably
so on as well?
I think we probably did 1 or 2 of those. Yeah. I mean, I don't actually recall off the top of my head, to be honest. But, yeah. Lost in the mists of time.
Yeah. Fascinating format, because the session falls roughly somewhere between studio and live,
right?
And depending on the day and who's working the board and it's very instantaneous, So you have to show up and man up and do it, And most of the time, I think we did it pretty well. So right, good. I wanted to, I guess, address sort of what happened towards the end of your era with The Cure. I had, a couple of people had asked me, like, are you going to talk to them about it? Is it okay? Because, of course, now you guys are fine. But towards the end, split was...
the best way to explain the whole thing is there's 2 factors here. Most bands, when they get, as big as The Cure, there's a lot of pressures, there's a lot of, different opinions, and that can come out in a bad way, which it obviously did with us. And also, The Cure to me was my family, for many, many years. And you think about your family, you don't always get on with your family. You can have disagreements. And that's basically what happened with me and Robert. Plus the fact I wasn't too well at the time that, I left The Cure. So I got better. But I didn't get better that quick, because otherwise we wouldn't have gone to court. But we went to court and we had all that nonsense, and then after that, a few years later, I realised Robert was coming to Los Angeles, and I wrote to him and said, we should have a meeting and talk about all this, because it's been a long time now. And we met up and we sat up talking all night, and we kind of resolved a lot of stuff. And now we're back to where we were when we were much younger, So that's good, One needs to resolve one's battles, and make things good again.
Right. So, and you said that you talked to him as recently as a few weeks ago.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're very modern. We email each other all the time. So, that's what happens, and it's it's kind of interesting.
And of course, I have to ask the question that the listeners want to know, which is any possibility of you playing with the Cure again?
I'm open to the possibility. In fact, I wrote to Robert last week or so and said, hey, Faith's anniversary is coming up, 30 years of Faith. Why don't we go out and play that and play it as a whole album and do it again as the original band? And the ball is in his court, as they say.
Very good. So we'll see, and lots of exciting reissues and new stuff coming out from the band, next year. So that would be
absolutely. There's a lot of stuff coming out.
That would make sense. So, and you said In Orange is in Orange is coming out.
Orange, yes, it's going to come out. I think next year as well, which is good because it was I suffered for my art making that thing because we filmed it the first night when the concert audience was there. And then a little bit of trickery the next day. We went back and filmed it when there's nobody in the place at all to just do the different shots. And in between those 2 days, I had jumped over a wall late at night and twisted my ankle very badly. And the doctor had to come and give me a shot and wrap up my ankle. So if you look very carefully at the shots of me on stage, my ankle sort of swells up and then goes down and swells up and goes down depending on which shot they used from which day,
Wow.
So anyway,
keep an eye out for that. So I keep forgetting that you brought in free stuff to give out.
Oh yes, lots of free stuff for people.
We have CDs and T-shirts, Levvenhurst CDs, Levvenhurst T-shirts.
Yep.
And so when the tunes get rolling again, we'll take the first couple of calls and give you some autographed CDs. We'll give you free passes to this Sunday's event, which Lol is coming and guest DJing with me at the Echo for Part-Time Punks for a Cure-centric night. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. And so. How are we doing on time? Are we ready to switch over? Yeah. Just about. Can we give just a taste of this present? I wanted to just play a little bit of this band called the Presence or Presence.
Presence. Yes.
The band which featured many Cure members.
Yeah, Paul Thompson was in it. Michael was in it. Gary, who was our old tech, was in it and played in the band with Simon. So yeah.
Very cool. So, and you guys did one record. I'm just going to play you a snippet. We've run out of time, unfortunately.
No problem.
So, but give us a call on the listener line. We'll give out some free stuff. And again, thanks to Lol Tolhurst for coming in to the studio. This is Presence, and the track is called Missing? Is that the one we picked out? All right. And this has been Part-Time Punks Radio Show on KXLU 88.9.